My name is Dan Jocelyn-Smitowski. I'm the director of the Center for Christian Jewish Learning at Boston College. We have a great collaboration with Mark and the Blasey Center. The hospitality here is always great, so thank you. So let me introduce Elliott Jones, our speaker. Elliott Jones is a senior at Boston College studying philosophy.
He's a smart senior.
Smart senior. He's a smarty. So he's interested in the history of philosophy and hopes to pursue a career in academia. This year he'll be pursuing a senior honors thesis on medieval influences in the thought of Descartes, which I very much want to read. And beyond studies, Elliott serves as editor-in-chief for Dianoia, Boston College's undergraduate philosophy journal. Alongside with being involved here at the Blasey Center, Elliott served as the fellowship with the Center for Christian Jewish Learning. We offer undergraduate and graduate student fellowships to pursue projects. And what he's doing today is an outcome of that particular project that he did with us. It's really been great to get to know Elliott over this past year. And this project he did really is a testimony to the great breadth of students we had at Boston College. I'm particularly grateful to Professor Brian Robinette, who served as Elliott's advisor on this project. Thank you, Brian, for the work you did as well. So please join me in welcoming Elliott to give his presentation today on Sabbath and Leisure as a Remedy for Modernity, a dialogue between Abraham Joshua Heschel and Josef Pieper.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks to Father Massa, the Blasey Center, Professor Jocelyn-Smitowski, Center for Christian Jewish Learning, and Professor Robinette, my advisor for this project. I have a lot to get through. I'm not going to get through all of it, so I don't have much time, so let's just get going.
Do you want to set your timer?
I have my watch here.
But I will give you a 5-minute warning.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Whatever that is.
So the main problem I'm addressing in this project, or I did address in this project, was the modern malaise of work. I think generally we can understand that modern culture experiences significant angst or despair the value of work today. We either think it's meaningless, or we think it's a self-destructive activity that we must get rid of or work through as fast as possible so that we can rest. And also, we also find that society, whether as consumers or as workers, are constantly frenetically rushing, frenetically buying, consuming, or working. And the problem is that this has negative effects on culture, politics, human flourishing, our happiness, and I think, and Heschel and Pieper will think, is philosophically dubious. And as part of a Christian-Jewish dialogue, I want to ask, how can the Christian-Jewish traditions help us relate to work positively, in a positive light? Of course, this is a relevant topic. This is a quote from Dilexit Nos that came out from Pope Francis, which he thinks the solution is the heart. And Heschel and Pieper have their own solutions spreading in the 20th century. The problem of the malaise, the despair of work. So Pieper and Heschel are two thinkers who responded to this question immediately after World War II. Sabbath in 1951 and Leisure, the Basis of Culture by Pieper in 1948. And the goal, I think, of both of these texts, they were written in different contexts, but the main goal, I think, is to attune people. For Heschel, he's responding to the Jewish community, and for Pieper, he's responding to largely Germans, Christian Germans, to attune people to the world so as to religiously experience celebration, festivity, wonder, and transcendence. And I say religiously experience because for Pieper and Heschel, there really is no such thing as celebration, festivity, true wonder, or transcendence without reference to the divine. And so that's why this ultimately is a religious project on both of parts. So let's start with Pieper, his response to the question of, or the problem of the malaise of work. He was a German Catholic philosopher. He used ancient philosophy and medieval philosophy and Christian moral values. In particular, he wrote some books on the theological virtues during World War II. And he was also, of course, writing after World War II. His main thesis in his book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, I think is threefold. One, modern society has reduced human nature, the definition of what it means to be human, ultimately to a worker. That is our main goal, as our main telos in life, is to be a worker. As such, the highest values of a worker are their activity, their toil, how much effort they put into the work they're doing, and their utility, what is the net benefit, the net product or outcome of the work that they're doing. He proposes that there are actually actions that transcend what he calls the world of total work. That is to say, a world in which every action is defined by how much activity, effort, and utility it has. So he thinks there are actions that transcend this. Among them, philosophical and aesthetic contemplation, the liberal arts, friendship, festivity, and worship. And he thinks if we can understand the value, or actually the value, there is no value of them in terms of the world of total work, but if we can understand the real value of them, these actions can expand our definition of human nature and ultimately the actions that we pursue, and hopefully lead to proper human flourishing and happiness. So his main thesis is right here. It's on the first couple pages of the book. And it says, culture depends for its very existence on leisure, and leisure in its turn is not possible unless it has a durable and consequently living link with the cultus, with divine worship. And so here from the very get-go, that worship, divine worship, is linked to what he thinks as leisure. So leisure for Pieper is not just resting. Resting is a means to an end. We rest so as to do more work. Whereas true leisure is, we don't pursue leisure to do more work. We pursue leisure because it's a good in itself. In actions, there are certain actions that fall under leisure, which would be the ones I mentioned earlier, such as philosophical contemplation or art, music, all sorts of other things. And all of these actions cannot be reduced to the highest values of work: activity, toil, and utility. And how Pieper differs from, I think, other thinkers like Aristotle. Aristotle would agree with all I've said so far, but Pieper adds this aspect of the soul of leisure, which is not just, it's an internal disposition of how I relate to leisurely actions, how I relate to a friend, how I relate to an action that is pursued as an end in itself. And as such, what this consists of is celebration. When I'm doing these actions, I have to understand that they are good in themselves. It is good that I am doing this action, but also it is good that reality is good. So celebration is central to Pieper's understanding of leisure. This is what he thinks is like the internal disposition of what leisure is. What is really celebration? What is this? So Pieper is taking some ideas from Thomas. This idea that all being, insofar as it is good. Good here is not a moral term, but rather an ontological term. So existence as an actuality is better than non-existence. We can put it that way. Because being is a perfection, it is good. So celebration in this sense is ontological rather than a moral quality. It'd be like taking delight in the fact that a tree is healthy rather than sick. That is an ontological state that I'm taking delight in. But I think Pieper is also open to a moral interpretation, which is a moral celebration, which is that the very existence of the tree itself is caused by a being. It's willed into existence, and because it's willed, it has a moral quality, and therefore we can say that the tree has a moral aspect that is good as well. So I think if we understand a religious element to celebration, that adds more meaning onto just a pure ontological understanding that Pieper takes from Thomas. And of course Thomas already has the religious implication, but that's another topic. Okay, and the opposite of celebration, and this is what relates to the malaise of work and also degrades human nature and degrades our capacity to pursue human flourishing, is another medieval idea called acedia, or translated as like sloth. Sloth is not just sitting on your couch, but it can look like that. It certainly can look like that. But it also could look like frenetically doing actions. You don't really know why you're doing them, but you're just running around and just doing stuff. And that is often what we see in modern work culture. Is people don't really know, they think it's good to work, they think it's good, but they don't really know why. So they keep working more and more and more. But the main aspect of acedia is an internal disposition. Just like the soul of leisure, there's a soul of acedia, a soul of sloth, and it's precisely the opposite of celebration. It's the inability to celebrate, and the inability to celebrate in your own existence, in the existence of others, the existence as such, the existence or the fruit of your work. And this Pieper calls like an existential poverty. It's something that degrades us and prohibits us from pursuing flourishing. So leisure is precisely the opposite of acedia, and this is why he thinks it is central to human flourishing. I do want to note that I think acedia is central to what work culture is. The inability to take delight in your work, to take delight in reality. I don't have time to read this, but this is a great quote from a 4th century monk that highlights the hatred of life from this disposition of acedia. He says, "Moreover, the demon sends the monk hatred against the place, hatred against life itself, and against the work of his hands." So this is an old idea, great older than the medieval idea. And so how is this really religious? So central to leisure is celebration. Another leisurely action for Pieper is festivity. Central to a festival is celebration. Pieper says like the most festive festival is divine worship. Why? Because the object of your love, your joy, your praise is the most lovable, joyful, praiseworthy object. So inherent to leisure celebration ultimately is religion. The religion worship is sort of like the highest, we could say like the highest leisurely action that is possible due to the object and perhaps like the internal dispositions. The most festive. I'm not going to do that.
Elliott, you're halfway through the line.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yes. This is. Okay. This is my last slide for Pieper. So without the soul of leisure, there is no celebration, no festivity, and no worship. Why? Because there's no joy. There's no love, joy, praise, sacrifice, or gifts. All of these are central to religion. Most religions, in particular, Pieper thinks Christianity. Why? Because all require the goodness of the object loved, praised, enjoyed, sacrificed, or received as a gift. Sacrifice doesn't really make sense if the thing you're sacrificing isn't good. If you don't think the object you're sacrificing is good, you're just throwing something away. That's not sacrifice. So all these, I love something you need, it requires the goodness of the object loved. Okay, so without a worldview in which the soul of leisure is possible, there's no such thing as love, sacrifice, joy, praise, or worship. So Pieper's solution, by expanding human action, can lead to an expansion of human nature, an expansion of human flourishing, and following from that, cultural, political renewal, and also how we relate to work, obviously. Okay, finally. So Abraham Joshua Heschel was a Polish-born Jewish rabbi, theologian, and philosopher. He fled Eastern Europe during World War II and came to the U.S., where he became a professor at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. I just want to mention this briefly. Central to Heschel's legacy is his intellectual work was intrinsically tied to his work on the ground. He was heavily involved in the civil rights movement. He marched on the March of Selma with Martin Luther King and others. And he was heavily involved in Christian-Jewish dialogue in the writing of Nostra Aetate, the ecumenical papal document. So the main theses, these are the main points of Heschel's book, The Sabbath, again written in 1951. Modern society is characterized by subduing nature, subduing space. We want to manage space and also time. That's why we have calendars. We just want to put everything into boxes. And in some sense, like, this is necessary. This is necessary for our survival. But it ultimately is not the end of human action. If for Pieper, leisure is sort of like the end of all action. For Heschel, it's the Sabbath. Heschel is much more writing to a Jewish audience, but also he believes this, like the Sabbath is the end of all action. So it provides a structure to time, provides a structure to frenetic activity. And during the Sabbath, it opens us up to certain experiences. Among them, tranquility, a peace of repose. It allows us to rest, not only to rest our bodies so that we do more work, but also just to rest in the world around us, to rest in others, and ultimately to rest in things. It allows us a time and a space for contemplation and worship. And again, celebration will be a key theme here. So some good quotes from Heschel's Sabbath. The Sabbath is a day for the sake of life. Humans are not a beast of burden. The Sabbath is not for the purpose of enhancing the efficiency of his work. So again, there's the highest value on the Sabbath is not utility, a product I get, the effort I put in, or anything I achieve, but rather something that I receive. And in his book on the philosophy of religion, he says that the beginning of our happiness lies in understanding that life without wonder is not worth living. So wonder will be central to Heschel's thought, whereas celebration is central to Pieper's thought. So the life that the Sabbath makes possible is a life of wonder, and central to this theme of wonder will be ultimately religion for Heschel. So Sabbath consists of rituals. Such rituals include the remembrance of creation, as told in Genesis, and certain commandments to keep the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. And for Jews, that has a special significance. Central to creation, again, is an idea of celebration. If the world is good, it is worthy to be celebrated and to take delight in. And thirdly, the Sabbath is a holy time for activities beyond mere activity, toil, and utility that allows one to open themselves to God, to the divine. The Sabbath is not concerned with putting effort in to get a product or to dominate the things of the world of space. Okay, so this is central to Heschel's philosophy of religion. So how does this tie into religion, Judaism? The Sabbath provides conditions for religious experience because it provides a time and a space away from the workday world. Heschel has this term, radical amazement. It allows a space and a time to contemplate the world. Why is there anything at all rather than nothing? This, for Heschel, has two responses, either wonder or sort of doubt and despair. Heschel will talk more about wonder because this wonder leads to religion, whereas doubt just leads to despair, and would be a key theme. It would be sort of analogous to acedia as well. So wonder at existence itself. The object of wonder, Heschel calls the ineffable, is something that we can't really put a concept to. This would be, these are just phenomenological terms that Heschel uses to describe sort of like the experience of a divine presence. This gives rise to a world full of meaning, awe, worthy of praise. And interestingly, for Heschel, that's absent from many of Pieper's thought and the books that I read, was a sense of moral duty. So central to Heschel's thought is that somehow in this encounter with the ineffable, I have a sense that something is being asked of me, and this will be related to Heschel's importance on divine commandments and moral duties, moral laws. And so this would be central to why we should even pursue religion. What are the rituals that we pursue? Because phenomenologically, I have a sense of a moral duty, and I should pursue that. So if leisure is a remedy for modernity in modern work culture for a Pieper, the Sabbath is a remedy for Heschel. The Sabbath is done for its own sake. It's not a means to a further end. It's an action. So that would fall under what Pieper calls a leisurely action. It provides a structure for all action, and it provides a structure in time. Heschel calls it a cathedral in time. And it opens the possibility for leisurely actions that aren't available if all action is reduced to work. So, like Pieper, the Sabbath provides a remedy for modernity, reclaiming time, orienting human action, and fostering a spirit of celebration, awe, wonder, that are all internal dispositions that I don't know are possible in an immanent world reduced to work, reduced to utility. If there's no, or at least if there's just no goodness to the world, I'm not sure how you have proper celebration or awe or wonder. Let me see. Yeah, we're going to go on. Practical considerations beyond just all this theoretical stuff. This came out of an interview with Professor Robin, and I thought was worthy to share, that if I could recommend some things, it would be to cultivate praise, love, joy, and sacrifice by understanding that those aren't possible without the goodness, the inherent goodness of the things that you are praising, loving, taking delight in, and sacrificing if you were to do that. And that understanding is not possible if you think all action is reduced to work, to utility. Secondly, I think we understand what the liberal arts are. Pieper writes about this a lot. There's a difference between the liberal arts. They're free. What are they free from? They're free from a product as an end result. Whereas versus the servile arts, the business school.
Andy,
So I think we need to cultivate the liberal arts, especially in a time when people they don't really understand what the point is. They're reducing funding for the liberal arts around the country. And I think we need to understand the concept of gift. This is not really, Pieper doesn't talk about this. I don't think Heschel talks about this, but this is sort of my own spin on it. I think we need a concept of gift that is sort of, it's like an act of a resistance against the world of total work. I don't think a pure gift is possible in a world of total work because, well, Pieper writes, the worker mistrusts everything that is effortless. He refuses to have anything as a gift. So if I think everything that I do for my own effort, I do because I achieve it, I don't really know how a gift is possible, either giving or receiving one. I think that is a profound loss to human experience and to human flourishing. Yeah, interestingly enough, Heschel writes that in anticipation for the Sabbath, we should welcome the Sabbath as a bride. So this sense of waiting in expectation for a gift that I don't achieve but receive. And with that, here's some further reading if you guys are interested in more. I have some of the books here you can flip through.
For our listening audience, might you name some of the essential books you think?
Right. So some good modern cultural commentary would be the South Korean-born German philosopher Byung-Chul Han, his book The Burnout Society, his book Vita Contemplativa, what is the contemplative life? Contemplation is central to Pieper's thought. The Scent of Time, he actually quotes Heschel in this book. What is unique about time that is separate from work time? Heschel's book, Man is Not Alone, that is his philosophy of religion. Yes, philosophy of religion. Pieper has an entire book on festivity, in tune with the world. I also took some insight from R.J. Snell's book, Acedia and Its Discontents, Metaphysical Boredom and an Empire of Desire. And then also a great biography of Heschel's, a recent book, Abraham Joshua Heschel, A Life of Radical Amazement by Julian Zelizer. And also Pieper has his own, three books of he wrote an autobiography, which I would highly recommend. The man met literally everyone and traveled everywhere, along with Heschel. With that being said, I'm open to questions and critiques and anything.
Thank you very much.
let me begin by asking the first question. So I know you worked hard on this project. So what are Pieper and Heschel saying the same thing? Are they saying the same thing focused on different ends? Are they more alike than different?
They're very, very similar. I think Heschel is in particular, Jewish. Pieper mentions Christianity in his works, I think, but it's not in particular like a Christian project. I think Leisure is fully compatible with the Augustine quote I skipped over.
This is what we do.
Yeah, Leisure is fully compatible in the Christian tradition. This is a quote from The End of the City of God. This is what Augustine imagines the beatific vision might be like. And interestingly enough, he talks about the Sabbath. He likens the beatific vision to the Sabbath, the seventh day, and he says we'll have leisure to be still. And central to leisure, as you can see, is a stillness, so we're not working, but we're also loving and we're praising. So that's inherent to the Christian tradition. I think both the Sabbath and leisure, the link between them is that they're ends in themselves. They're not means to a further end, and that means like they're a certain type of activity that is unique. Yep.
Thank you, Elliott, for your talk. It was very insightful. So you're a busy student who toils. So I'm curious, how was your research on the Sabbath and leisure inspired you to take a break?
Yeah, that is so great. That's a really good question. I will say I was definitely rushing frenetically in the spring to finish this project. However, I do want to highlight that I actually did a majority of the reading and the writing and two unique experiences. One was the Manresa Silent Retreat here at BC. I would highly recommend this for anyone. And secondly, during my spring break, I spent a week at a Benedictine monastery praying, working, going on walks, and a lot of the time I was reading Pieper, I was reading Heschel. So I think reading this theoretical stuff, doing some work, but also having opportunities for leisurely activities was central to my research process itself. Yeah.
I wonder if you could share what insight you got into the tradition that's not your own that you're most grateful for, and what did you learn about interfaith dialogue from this project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I had actually trouble. This is like the first project I've ever done that was like this, and I really had trouble at first wanting to make sure I'm grasping the concepts properly. Thankfully, Heschel's writing is so clear; it's remarkably clear, but it's also hard to really grasp it systematically. It's just aphorisms, just kind of jumbled together. I think what helped me the most was Heschel's philosophy of religion, philosophy of Judaism, that helped me sort of grasp the central, principles of Judaism. But I honestly just think that because I was focusing on the Sabbath, and Christians have an understanding of what the Sabbath is, that was sort of like my gateway into understanding the Jewish tradition.
Thank you for your presentation, Elliott. Very insightful. How would you respond to the situation of people whose environment is only to work, like people who have to work to provide for the family and do not get a time for breaks, as opposed to someone who has a 9 to 5 and easily can separate work from home life? This is a really good critique of leisure of Pieper, which is that it seems sort of elitist. Not everyone actually has time to pursue leisurely actions. I'm trying to find a section here. But I think that is certainly a valid critique. And Pieper thinks, so I really only talked about the internal dispositions of leisure, but of course Pieper, and also Aristotle, thinks that there needs to be external conditions for leisure to be possible. It requires that you don't have to work all the time to provide for your needs, your utilitarian needs, which actually need to be met for survival. That is central to an aspect of human flourishing. So Pieper, he has a couple pages on a political system, some political advice for what that might look like. He's writing against the Nazi regime. Here's just some quotes here. He calls it deproletarianization.
he doesn't want a society of proletariats, which means worker. But he thinks this requires giving the wage earner, quote, giving the wage earner the opportunity to save and acquire property. So property is central to this. By limiting the power of the state in forcing their citizens to work. And thirdly, he thinks we must overcome the inner impoverishment, which would be the internal dispositions. So I think there are material conditions required, and of course not everyone is going to have access to them. I can talk more about that later.
Yeah, so thank you. I really enjoyed it. My question is really when you were suggesting that we embrace the liberal arts and you pointed out the distinction between the liberal arts and the practical arts. Isn't that like a way of saying, so as long as we are producing, so there's no way to do it with an internal disposition that is maybe more leisurely, even if we're producing, we can still do it with a view not only on the actual outcome, like, the stocks I'm selling to make millions for me, but rather maybe with a spirit of service. So kind of my pushback against that distinction is that it seems that whenever we're working, so let me rephrase it. Isn't it a way of saying that work is like bad? Like, we need to work 9 to 5 and then we get back home and then we have leisure, which is the real good thing.
Right. No, that's a good point. I think, so Pieper and Heschel, they don't want to actually get rid of work or think it's something evil to be rejected. But I think by offering if we can understand what the liberal arts are, what an end in itself is, then we can actually, I think, greater appreciate work that is utilitarian, that is servile. We can understand that it is good to even pursue to produce a product that is also good, only in light of actions that don't have a product. But I think you're absolutely right. Like if we have a concept that like celebration is real and we can actually truly celebrate, then even work that has a product is also good, of course. Just not to be an end all. Yeah.
I think that's if I could. Coming from the Jewish community, though, I think a wonderful presentation, and I think it's great we bring together Catholic and Jewish thinkers together because we all have so much in common than what divides us, and that's essential. It seems to me Pieper is really talking at a universal level, which Heschel would buy into. What he's suggesting, it fits in China, it fits in Syria, and it fits in throughout the world. Heschel's speaking, though I think it's important to know, it's different than Pieper in that you have to prepare for leisure as far as the Sabbath. That means you're cooking, you're cleaning, everything is done, inviting the guests happens before Friday afternoon.
Yes.
Lighting of the candles is 18 minutes before there's actual sunset. And from then on, we clear out all work. We don't drive, we don't write, we don't cook, all of these things that pull us back into a kind of materialistic existence. And it's a time for what we think of avodat kodesh. It's a time a whole day to lift up into service of God and holiness. So there's learning, there's prayer, there's friendship, there's making love of a couple. It's a double mitzvah on Shabbat, on the Sabbath. So it's really, and I think Heschel is presuming this, that there's 39 different categories of work that we don't do. And once you clear all that out, suddenly there's room to sit back and see, wow, this really is my life. I'm not just a cog in a machine. I'm not here just to work. I'm here for something else, something very special.
That's great. Thank you. You put it more beautifully than I did. Thank you.
Heschel.
Penny.
So thank you for your talk, Elliott. I have a question about the how do you understand modernity and the basic premises of Pieper and the rabbi, because it seems to me that they presume that the world is good by itself, and therefore we can celebrate our life, which is also good by itself, by its own being. But a basic premises in my understanding for modernity is that the nature of the world is not fine, therefore we have to use our human power to counter it.
Right.
And that's why we have to work to transform the world into a better world.
Yes.
So there seems to be a potential conflict between the possible leisure that you are introducing to us and the basic premise of our modernity. Is the world by itself a good world that we can celebrate by living, or is the world something that is not perfect at its present state and therefore needs to be transformed by human work? There seems to be a tension in the premises of modernity and the kind of leisure we are discussing here. So how do you understand these?
Yeah, no, that's great. There's a quote, I don't know if Pieper uses it, but it's certainly relevant here, which is that Marx said something to the effect of, all the philosophers up until now have tried to know and understand the world, but the real purpose of philosophy is to change the world. And that certainly is part of the modern understanding, and I think we can understand this also from Francis Bacon, Machiavelli, and others who think that the point of human action is to dominate the world, maybe because it's evil and it needs fixing and it needs subduing, or simply because via our will to power we can dominate it and make it serve our own ends, and that's it. I'm not sure, was there a further question that you had, or how I understand it?
How, as a modern person, living this modern world and to a certain extent be compelled to accept these premises in our actual working, how can we celebrate the leisure in the way that requires a different premises that contradicts in modernity?
So you're saying, can we celebrate, is it possible to celebrate the world if we don't think it's good?
Yes.
I don't know. I think we can, but it would be a mere shell of what true celebration is for Pieper and Heschel.
And then my question is, the celebration that we're discussing here, is it still possible under our world today? Because we at least I am living this world, and I try to live my leisure time in the leisure way that you're discussing. But maybe not every time, but sometimes I try. You can see the tension between these premises, and that troubles me. So, is it really possible for us to accept these solutions to modernity?
That's interesting.
There's a deep conflict in their basic premises.
Yeah, I think it's both a individual effort. It requires not just external conditions, but also your own internal dispositions. But I think there is something that you're pointing, which is like a collective effort. If we all understand that the world actually is good, that requires a broader communal effort than maybe I presented it here, which is just like something solitary we do. I would say it's possible. Yeah.
But does anybody really want to call themselves modern now? This is a serious question. Now that we're in modernity is a bad word,
right?
And now that we're in the modernity led us into all kinds of problems, and we're quite proudly postmodern. So we reject precisely that ideal that the human beings are about changing the real world. Like, really? Is that our project? Marx was wrong.
I wonder if our rejection in present day is still possible, because even our rejection is on the foundation of modernity. So maybe I'm pessimistic about this.
You're very pessimistic. Any other questions? Yes.
This is a bit of a speculative question. So I'm not asking you to prognosticate, but I think we can all agree that AI is going to have a massive impact on jobs and work. Automation. I'm not asking you to give recommendations or to predict the future, but do you think that at least if some of the not even maximalist interpretations of the coming changes of the AI, that a lot of people are going to be out of work, or that the nature of work is going to change due to automation. Do you think that either one of your figures might have something to say about that, about the dignity of work, or what might be worth fighting for in light of some of these somewhat uncertain but still probably very massive changes in terms of the human's relationship with work?
Yeah, I have more thoughts on the philosophical grounds of AI itself, but
sure those.
It could make it seem like if increasing automation that we would begin to hate these machines that are taking our jobs, and hopefully not hate the work that they're doing. That would I think be a huge negative. Because it was once humans who were doing those jobs, and there had to have been some good there. And it's also, in some sense, I guess I'm just thinking of like a large language model. All of those words, all of that information was made by humans. And we can't understand that. It's actually creating connections for us that we can't make. And those are human connections there. So I think we have to, this isn't anything at all related to Pieper or Heschel, but I just think we need to understand, like, we need to humanize it. If we don't, we risk like a hatred of it, which would fall into acedia, I think.
If I may just add real quickly, it seems that some of the most idealistic versions of AI and the changes being brought is that human beings will be freed for more recreation and, let's say, even contemplation. That seems doubtful to me, but in any case, that's part of the fantasy with this. And I just wonder whether or not, in a kind of ironic shift, that we're having to do more to affirm the dignity and need of work in the face of some of these maximalist and idealistic views about automation.
Yes, in my research project, I think I had a line which is that a world of total work would be a dystopia, but also a world of pure leisure would be a dystopia. Because you actually need both. You need both actions that are means to an end and actions that are ends in themselves. There is a dignity to work. Both the Christian and Jewish traditions have affirmed that there is a dignity to the work that we do. It is something that's necessary. It's part of human nature. If we were to reject that, we would be rejecting part of human nature, and of course then true human flourishing wouldn't be possible. And I don't suspect that if we do have a world of total leisure, we will be doing the actions that Pieper says we should be properly doing.
Thank you.
Can I add? I think that there is a very deep potential in the last topic of gift. Because in fact there is a little bit tension between this concept and the language of your presentation, because even when you spoke about leisure, you spoke in terms of actions.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is a kind of Aristotelic tradition to see activity as good and passivity as bad. But one of your books mentioned the inactivity, in praise of inactivity.
Yes.
And this is a potential, I think, idea for development, to think about leisure and the Sabbath not as a kind of another doing, but a kind of co-being, or the ability of being, which is non-Western way of thinking. And if so, maybe we can also think not about, we shouldn't be split between what, work or leisure, but how. Maybe the challenge of liberal arts is to say we are not going to think actively. It's a kind of another work. The challenge of liberal arts is the ability of attentiveness, to stand still and to let the ideas to astonish us, wonder. So maybe, and maybe this is also a kind of rethinking about work. The question is not if we are in a work or in a leisure, but how we make our work. Maybe there is a way to work in a kind of co-being instead of doing, especially in the liberal arts, but in every work. The question is the how, not the what. And maybe maybe these ideas of leisure and the Sabbath is a potential to not only to get ourselves out of modernity, but all of the Western tradition of Aristotle, and to open our minds to another kind of living.
Great, thank you. That's really great. It'll have to it'll take a lot to break my Aristotelian brain, but Hahn calls the Sabbath an inactive activity. It's an activity that is the least active because it's predicated on receiving rather than achieving. And Pieper talks about this when he talks about reason versus understanding, or ratio and intellectus. He has a whole couple chapters on cognitional theory, but ratio, when we're reasoning, we're discursively reasoning. It's like an active work. Whereas intellectus, when we understand something, when we finally grasp that concept, it sort of comes to us and we receive it. So I think the qualitative change there, or the qualitative aspect there, is something I could definitely look into in the future. Thank you.
I'm curious, it follows a little from the last two questions. These people are writing in the late 40s and early 50s, and I'm wondering whether they engage at all with Marxism, because the big political projects that are ongoing in that time are denazification and communism. And while I think the actually existing communisms don't particularly engage in the better parts of Marxist thought, the question of how you work, is there accountability, is there dignity, is there purpose, are you just trying to rip off consumers with cheap goods produced under lethal conditions? Do they engage with that? I mean, there's work and there's leisure or worship or celebration, but do they engage with somehow the structure of work? Because it's not just we go out and pick berries off the bush. People work in factories, people work in offices, people work under social conditions over which they may have very little control. So is that a conversation that they engage in their work?
So are you in particular asking about Marxism or about...
Well, they could do it in other ways too. It doesn't have to be with reference to Marx, but is the sort of the terms on which one works, and that this is not just an individual activity, it's a socially structured activity. Do they engage with that issue?
Yeah, I mean, Pieper writes about Marx a lot in the books that I've read. I don't know about Heschel. I'm not too sure if they talk about work as something that's socially constructed or the different types of work that we're doing. It's more really in these general terms.
Thank you. This is a lot for me to take in. I'm not sure I got a whole lot of it, but I'm curious if the celebration of all leisure, if that is looking at God more from the legalistic master perspective or from the father love perspective, because I feel like that would probably change how it's actually practiced. If that makes sense.
Could you explain a bit more?
I'm guessing that if this celebration of God is from the master perspective, maybe there's a bit more of a legalistic interpretation in how it's actually put into practice. Where if it's more of the loving God, maybe there's more flexibility. For instance, if you could do it during the week, not on the Sabbath, or things like that, maybe it's a bit more flexible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like for Heschel, when Jews are commanded to keep the Sabbath holy, that's the only day that they worship. That's the only day that they pray, that they engage in friendship, or that they can celebrate. I think the idea is that we take the fruits of what we do on the Sabbath into the work week. So it's not, yes, there is a time, a holy time for that, but we also take the fruits of that during normal time. In the Christian tradition, there's not a command to celebrate. It's just something that, I've tried to show philosophically follows. I'm not sure how you can really celebrate without this understanding. Yeah.
One of your slides, you played on the phrase "killing time."
Yeah.
That is a very. I think you used it well to make your point there, to make Pieper's point there. I'm maybe more intrigued by this phrase "spending time," and I guess my question about if, as Pieper says, we don't just perform leisure, we recognize it, we know what we're doing. There's some kind of like agreement, maybe explicit oftentimes, like calling something worship or festivity or whatever. We have to know that that's what we're doing.
Right.
So I wonder about like, maybe this gets into the question about Aristotle and activity too. Like, is embracing leisure or understanding it better a problem of choosing to spend our time differently? Or is it a problem of not thinking in terms of time as like a thing we have that we choose to put here or there? Do we have to maybe like recognize that time is a thing we have that we spend, or do we have to not do that explicitly? It seems, I'm curious, maybe it's not a clear question.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be prudent to think that we have infinite time, and that because, allotting time in a calendar seems sort of overbearing to time itself, that we shouldn't manage our time at all. I don't think that would be prudent. But I think the one thing that maybe could help is just that the understanding of time during the work week is quantitative. During the Sabbath, during leisurely activities, it's a qualitative change of time. The sense of time is different. Time is still quantitatively the same, but something different is going on. I don't know if that helps.
If I may, just the reason I'm interested in the question is because there's set up early on also like a tension between necessity, which does make it so we have to do work.
Mm-hmm.
Work is a good thing that we have to do. And leisure, which is unnecessary in some way, or it's
right
outside of that dichotomy. And it seems like as long as we have time that we have to think about, and we choose to arrange our leisure like on a calendar or something,
right?
We are putting it in the like framework of necessity still. So it seems like a
yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, in some sense, we have to. I mean, leisure is not necessary to survival. It's necessary for flourishing.
I think I have a question. I might have lost it. Elliott, this is really helpful.
What a flop for the beginning. I think I have a question.
I think I have a question. I have a question. I was. This is really helpful, Elliott. Thank you so much. I was particularly interested in your discussion about acedia.
Yes.
I hadn't thought of it in that way, and I hadn't read RJ's book.
I didn't read it all. I just read
Okay.
selected excerpts.
True scholar.
But I hadn't thought of acedia in that way of sort of the, endless running around.
Yes, yes.
Kierkegaard talks about it too. But and I immediately thought of a conversation I had just the other day with a student who said, I can't stop scrolling. I just scroll, and I know it's just this, just filling my, or giving my attention to something that's just meaningless. And the student said, I know it, and I just can't stop it. And that's really helpful. So this new way of thinking about acedia is really helpful to me in these conversations. And it draws my attention to the question of attention and what is it. I've always been so impressed with this idea of the Sabbath as a sort of renewed time and space for attention to the things, to the divine things and the holy things. And I wonder so I guess my question might be, I wonder if celebration or feast in my Christian tradition, if we need a different way of thinking about attention, right? Because attention, the whole attention economy is stealing that from us. Mm-hmm. It makes me think of Simone Weil's ideas on attention
mm-hmm.
and how important that is.
Yeah, that's really great. I wish I had time to talk about Byung-Chul Han. I have some slides here. And I don't know if these would be helpful. Yeah, here we go. So in his book, I think the Contemplative Life, the book, he talks about that he's talking about attention, talking about time. He thinks time is atomistic. It doesn't really have anything connecting them. There's no like end or purpose to time. And also so too with our attention. It's sort of, especially like scrolling, it's very atomistic. Nothing is really, if you were to ask them why they're doing what they're doing, they don't really know why. If they had a why, there would be a purpose and they would be structured. So there's like a loss of structure there that Han talks about, and also, especially like social media or something like that. The thing you can't contemplate it because it's actually not. The thing you're observing is not resting in itself. It's constantly changing, and you actually we can't rest physically and mentally unless there is things that we can rest in. And that's something, a line from Han. Yeah, so the inability to contemplate, linger, endure, and pause and be attentive is characteristic of an attention economy that's based off just stimuli. I don't know if that helped at all. But I would definitely recommend Han on this. Yeah.
Please join me in thanking Elliott.